Marcus never expected the person who would make him freeze in the middle of a crowded room to be his ex-wife's mother. As a single father, he had grown used to judgmental stares and whispered comments. But the smirk on Helen's face was different. When she leaned close, her breath warm against his ear, and whispered, "Want to look?" while tugging slightly at the edge of her coat, as if hiding something underneath, his entire body went rigid. No one around them noticed anything unusual. Was it a harmless joke, or a signal for trouble that could shatter whatever peace he had left? Saturday morning arrived like every other weekend in Marcus's life. The small apartment was quiet, except for the sound of cartoons playing from the living room. He stood in the bathroom, a pink hairband between his teeth, trying to gather his 7-year-old daughter's hair into something that resembled a ponytail. Lily sat on a stool in front of the mirror, her legs swinging impatiently. The talent show at her school started in 2 hours, and Marcus had already failed twice at making her hair look decent. His fingers fumbled with the strands, twisting them the wrong way before starting over again. The apartment was clean, almost too clean. Everything had its place because Marcus needed order to feel like he was in control. But there were signs everywhere that something was missing. The hook by the door held only his jacket and Lily's tiny coat. The fridge had drawings held up by magnets, all of them featuring 2 stick figures instead of 3. On the shelf in the hallway, a family photo from 4 years ago lay face down, covered in a thin layer of dust. He had never thrown it away, but he could not bear to look at it either. 2 years had passed since the divorce. Jessica, his ex-wife, had moved to another city shortly after everything was finalized. She called Lily once a week, sometimes twice, but the conversations were always short. Marcus never asked about her new life, and she never offered details. They had agreed on shared custody, but in practice, Lily stayed with him full-time. It was easier that way. Easier for Jessica, at least. Marcus had stopped questioning it a long time ago. He simply did what needed to be done, one day at a time. What made things complicated was Helen, Jessica's mother. She still lived about 20 minutes away from Marcus's apartment, in the same house where Jessica had grown up. Helen was 62 years old, a retired high school teacher with sharp eyes and a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like a test. Even when Marcus was still married to Jessica, he had never felt comfortable around her. She had a habit of looking at him as if she knew something he did not, as if she was always measuring him against some invisible standard he could never meet. After the divorce, Helen had made it clear that she wanted to stay in Lily's life. Marcus could not argue with that. Lily adored her grandmother, and he was not the kind of person who would keep a child away from family out of spite. So he allowed the visits, the phone calls, the occasional dinners. But every interaction with Helen left him feeling drained, like he had just walked through a minefield without knowing where the explosives were buried. He avoided conflict at all costs. He hated being judged, and Helen made him feel judged every single time. Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. She was asking if she looked pretty enough for the stage. Marcus looked at his work in the mirror, the lopsided ponytail that somehow still managed to be endearing, and told her she looked like a star. She grinned, and for a moment, everything else faded away. This was why he kept going. This small person who trusted him completely, who looked at him like he was the entire world. He would do anything to protect that. The school auditorium was already half full when Marcus and Lily arrived. Parents filled the rows with cameras ready, chatting in hushed voices while children in costumes ran back and forth behind the curtain. Marcus found 2 seats in the middle section, not too close to the front and not too far in the back. Lily kissed his cheek and ran off to join her classmates, her excitement radiating in every step. Marcus settled into his seat, scrolling through his phone to pass the time. The chair next to him remained empty for a few minutes, and he hoped it would stay that way. Then he caught a familiar scent, something floral and expensive, and looked up to find Helen lowering herself into the seat right beside him. There were at least a dozen empty chairs scattered around the auditorium, but she had chosen the one next to him. She smiled, the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes, and said she did not want to miss her granddaughter's big moment. Marcus nodded politely and turned his attention back to the stage. The show began with a group of first graders singing a song about sunshine. Helen leaned toward him during the performance, commenting on how adorable the children were, how the decorations looked cheap, how the sound system could use an upgrade. Her shoulder brushed against his. Her hand landed briefly on his forearm when she made a joke. Marcus shifted in his seat, creating a small gap between them. But Helen did not seem to notice, or did not care. Lily's turn came somewhere in the middle of the program. She stood on stage with 5 other kids, performing a short dance routine. Marcus recorded the whole thing on his phone, his chest swelling with pride. Helen clapped enthusiastically beside him, and for a moment he almost forgot his discomfort. Then the routine ended, and the lights dimmed for a set change. In the darkness, Helen leaned close. Her breath was warm against his ear, carrying a hint of mint. Her lips curved into that same unreadable smirk he had seen before. She whispered the word slowly, deliberately. "Want a look?" Her fingers moved to the edge of her coat, tugging it slightly, as if there was something hidden underneath that she wanted to reveal. Marcus's entire body locked up. He could not move, could not speak, could not even turn his head to see what she meant. The moment stretched into eternity. Then the stage lights came back on, flooding the auditorium with brightness. Helen straightened in her seat, her expression neutral, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She watched the next performance as if nothing had happened. Marcus sat frozen, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had no idea what she had wanted to show him. He had no idea if she had wanted to show him anything at all, or if the whole thing had been some kind of strange joke. The ambiguity was suffocating. The rest of the show passed in a blur. Marcus clapped when others clapped, smiled when Lily waved at him from the wings, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. When the final act ended and parents began collecting their children, he grabbed Lily's hand and headed for the exit without looking back. He did not say goodbye to Helen. He could not bring himself to face her again, not until he understood what had just happened. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Marcus sat alone in his living room, staring at the wall. The question repeated itself in his head like a broken record. What did she mean? What was she going to show me? Am I imagining things? He had always thought of Helen as cold, maybe even manipulative, but this was different. This felt like a line being tested, a boundary being pushed. And the worst part was that he could not be sure if the line existed only in his mind. 3 days passed without any contact from Helen. Marcus started to convince himself that he had overreacted, that it had been nothing more than an awkward moment blown out of proportion by his own anxieties. Then his phone rang on a Tuesday evening. Helen's voice was pleasant, almost warm. She said she wanted to take Lily out for ice cream on Saturday, just the 2 of them. She mentioned a new shop that had opened downtown, said it had great reviews. Marcus listened, his grip tightening around the phone. Every instinct told him to say no, to make up an excuse, to keep his daughter away from whatever was happening. But then Lily appeared in the doorway, having overheard the conversation, her eyes wide with excitement. "Ice cream with Grandma. Can I go, Daddy? Please." Marcus looked at his daughter's hopeful face and felt his resolve crumble. He could not explain to a 7-year-old why he was suddenly afraid of her grandmother. He could not punish Lily for something she did not understand, and he could not prove. So he made a decision. He told Helen that Lily could go, but he would be coming along. He framed it as wanting to spend more time with his daughter, nothing more. Helen agreed without hesitation, her tone light, almost amused. After he hung up, Marcus stood in the kitchen for a long time. He knew he was walking into something, though he could not name what it was, but avoiding it had not made it go away. The only way to understand what was happening was to face it directly, even if the answers were ones he did not want to hear. Saturday came faster than Marcus had hoped. He spent the morning cleaning an already clean apartment, reorganizing shelves that did not need reorganizing, doing anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from spiraling. Lily bounced around the living room in her favorite yellow dress, counting down the minutes until ice cream. Her excitement was pure and untainted by the complications Marcus carried in his chest. He envied that innocence. They met Helen at the new ice cream shop downtown, a bright little place with pastel walls and too many flavor options. Helen was already seated at a corner table when they arrived, wearing a cream-colored blouse and a pleasant smile. She stood to hug Lily, who ran into her arms without hesitation. Then she turned to Marcus, her eyes lingering on him just a second longer than necessary, and thanked him for coming along. Her tone was sincere. There was nothing in her words or her expression that suggested anything out of the ordinary. The three of them sat together, surrounded by the chatter of families and the hum of a soft jazz playlist. Lily ordered a double scoop of strawberry with sprinkles. Helen chose vanilla, simple and classic. Marcus asked for coffee flavor, though he barely touched it. He watched Helen interact with Lily, answering her questions about school, laughing at her jokes, complimenting her dress. It was exactly what a loving grandmother should do. There were no strange glances, no lingering touches, no whispered comments. Marcus began to wonder if he had invented the whole thing in his head. Then Lily announced that she needed more napkins and slid off her chair before anyone could stop her. The napkin dispenser was near the front counter, only a few steps away, but far enough that she could not hear their conversation. Helen watched her go, then turned her attention to Marcus. Her smile remained, but something shifted behind her eyes. She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand, and looked at him the way someone might look at a puzzle they were trying to solve. She told him he seemed tense lately, that he carried himself like a man expecting something bad to happen. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. She said she understood how hard it must be, raising a child alone, dealing with everything Jessica had left behind. If he ever needed someone to talk to, she continued, someone who could actually listen without judgment, she was always available. The words were harmless on the surface, but the way she emphasized certain syllables, the way her eyes held his without blinking, sent a chill down his spine. Lily returned with a fistful of napkins, and Helen leaned back as if the conversation had never happened. She resumed her role as the doting grandmother, asking Lily about her favorite subjects and whether she had made any new friends. Marcus sat in silence, his ice cream melting in its cup. He could not shake the feeling that he was being tested, though he had no idea what the right answers were. The outing ended without further incident. Helen hugged Lily goodbye and told Marcus to take care of himself. He nodded, unable to form a proper response, and drove home with his daughter chattering happily in the back seat. That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Helen's words over and over. Was he being paranoid? Was she simply being kind? Or was there something beneath the surface that he was too afraid to acknowledge? 2 weeks passed. Marcus threw himself into work, using spreadsheets and deadlines as a distraction from the thoughts that refused to leave him alone. Helen called twice during that period, both times to speak with Lily. The conversations were brief and unremarkable. She did not ask to see Marcus or suggest any more outings. He started to breathe a little easier. Then came a Thursday afternoon when Helen offered to babysit Lily while Marcus attended a late meeting at work. He hesitated, but his options were limited. The regular babysitter was unavailable, and asking a coworker felt like admitting he could not handle his own life. He agreed, telling himself it would be fine. Lily would be happy, and he would pick her up right after the meeting ended. 2 hours at most. The meeting ran longer than expected. By the time Marcus pulled into Helen's driveway, the sun had already begun to set, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn. The house looked the same as it always had, a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch. Jessica had grown up here. Marcus had attended countless family dinners in this house during their marriage, always feeling like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. He knocked, and Helen opened the door with a warm smile. She told him Lily was in the living room watching cartoons and invited him inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and something baking in the oven. Helen explained that she had made cookies for Lily to take home, but they needed a few more minutes. She suggested Marcus wait in the kitchen while she checked on them. Marcus followed her, stopping near the refrigerator while Helen moved toward the oven. The kitchen was small, but immaculate, every surface gleaming under the overhead light. He could hear the faint sound of the television from the other room, Lily's occasional laughter reaching him through the walls. He told himself to relax. This was just a normal interaction between adults. There was nothing to fear. Helen pulled on oven mitts and bent to open the oven door, filling the room with the warm scent of fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies. She placed the tray on the counter, then turned to face Marcus. The space between them felt smaller than it should have been. She had not moved closer, but somehow the room seemed to shrink. She removed the oven mitts slowly, setting them aside, and looked at him with an expression he could not read. Then she reached for a dish towel on the counter, and it slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor near his feet. She bent to pick it up, and as she rose, her hand brushed against his leg. The contact was brief, barely a second, but it was deliberate. He felt it in the way her fingers lingered, the way she looked up at him with something that was definitely not apologetic. Marcus stepped back, his spine pressing against the cold surface of the refrigerator. There was nowhere else to go. Helen straightened, still standing too close, and spoke in a low voice that the television noise would easily cover. She told him that Jessica had never known how to appreciate the good things in front of her. Her daughter had always been like her father, cold and selfish, taking without giving. But Helen saw things differently. She saw Marcus for who he really was, a good man who had been treated unfairly, who deserved more than what life had given him. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of small footsteps echoed from the hallway. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, announcing that she was ready to go home. Helen stepped back smoothly, her expression shifting to one of grandmotherly affection. She handed Lily a small bag of cookies and told her to be a good girl for her father. Marcus grabbed Lily's hand, muttered a quick thank you, and led her out of the house as fast as he could without running. In the car, his hands trembled on the steering wheel. He could no longer pretend this was his imagination. Helen had made her intentions clear, not through explicit words, but through actions that left no room for misinterpretation. The question now was what he could possibly do about it. If he confronted her, she could deny everything. If he told Jessica, it would be his word against her mother's. And Lily adored her grandmother. Any action he took would ripple outward, affecting the one person he was trying to protect. The days that followed were filled with a constant low-grade anxiety that Marcus could not shake. He went through the motions of daily life, making breakfast, driving Lily to school, sitting through meetings at work. but his mind was always elsewhere. He found himself analyzing every past interaction with Helen, searching for signs he might have missed, wondering how long this had been building beneath the surface. One evening, while Marcus was preparing dinner, Lily sat at the kitchen table doing her homework. She mentioned casually, without looking up from her math problems, that Grandma Helen asked a lot of questions about Daddy. Marcus froze, his hand hovering over the pot of pasta. He asked her, keeping his voice as neutral as possible, what kind of questions? Lily shrugged, her attention still on the numbers in front of her. She said Grandma wanted to know if Daddy was happy, if Daddy ever cried, if anyone came to visit Daddy at home. Regular stuff, Lily added, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Helen was using his daughter to gather information about his personal life, probing for vulnerabilities through an innocent child. The realization made him sick. He managed to keep his composure, telling Lily that it was nice of Grandma to care, and returned to the pasta with hands that would not stop shaking. After Lily went to bed, he sat alone in the dark living room, trying to figure out his next move. A few days later, his phone rang with a number he had not seen in months. Jessica. She rarely called, and when she did, it was usually about logistics, scheduling, things that could have been handled through text. This call felt different from the start. Her voice was casual, almost too casual, as she asked how Lily was doing, whether school was going well, if there was anything she needed to know. Marcus answered her questions briefly, waiting for the real reason behind the call. It came soon enough. Jessica mentioned that her mother had been talking about him lately, saying that he had been coming around the house quite often. She did not sound accusatory, just curious, maybe slightly confused. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. He had only been to Helen's house twice in the past month, both times to pick up Lily. But Helen had apparently painted a different picture, one where he was the one seeking contact, the one showing up uninvited. He understood immediately what was happening. Helen was controlling the narrative, setting up a version of events that positioned him as the pursuer. If things ever came to light, she had already laid the groundwork to make herself look like the victim. He told Jessica that he had only been there to pick up their daughter, nothing more. His voice came out steadier than he felt. Jessica seemed to accept the explanation, though there was a hint of something unresolved in her tone. She said she was just checking, that her mother could be dramatic sometimes, and ended the call with a quick goodbye. After she hung up, Marcus sat motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, even though the line was dead. He was trapped in a situation with no easy exit. Speaking up meant risking his credibility, his relationship with his daughter, possibly even his custody arrangement. Staying silent meant allowing Helen to continue pushing boundaries, continue weaving her web of half-truths. And beneath all the anger and fear, there was something else, a deep shame that he could not fully explain. He kept asking himself if he had done something to invite this, if there was some signal he had unknowingly sent. The self-doubt was almost worse than the situation itself. Another week crawled by. Marcus had started avoiding any situation that might put him in contact with Helen. He arranged for Lily to call her grandmother from his phone, always in his presence, always with clear time limits. He declined Helen's invitations for weekend outings, citing work obligations that did not exist. He was building walls, but he knew they would not hold forever. On a Wednesday evening, Marcus stopped at the supermarket after work. It was a routine trip, milk and bread, and whatever else they had run out of. The parking lot was half empty, lit by the orange glow of overhead lamps. He loaded his bags into the trunk and was about to get into his car when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Helen stood a few feet away, dressed in a dark coat, her purse hanging from one arm. She said it was such a coincidence running into him here. Her smile was pleasant, but her eyes were sharp, watchful. Marcus nodded, his hand still on the car door, ready to make an excuse and leave, but Helen stepped closer, closing the distance between them before he could react. She told him that she knew he had been avoiding her. Her voice was calm, almost understanding, as if she was discussing the weather rather than something that had been keeping him awake at night. She said she did not blame him, that she knew it must be confusing, overwhelming even, but she needed him to understand that she was not his enemy. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Helen reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She pressed it into his hand, her fingers brushing against his palm. She told him she had been meaning to give this to him since the day of Lily's talent show, but he had left so quickly. She wanted him to have it, to look at it when he was alone, and then he would understand. She stepped back, her expression softening into something that might have been tenderness on anyone else. She told him not to open it here, to wait until he was home, and after he saw what was inside, she said, he would know what to do. Then she turned and walked toward her own car, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot. Marcus stood frozen, the envelope heavy in his hand. He could feel that it contained something more than paper, something with weight and shape. The drive home was a blur. He barely remembered putting Lily to bed or answering her questions about his day. His entire focus was on the envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, waiting. Once the apartment was quiet, he sat at the table and opened it. Inside were several photographs, old ones with faded edges, showing a younger Jessica in various poses. Some were from her college years, others from what looked like a family vacation. There was nothing inappropriate about the images themselves, but the fact that Helen had collected them, saved them, given them to him, made his skin crawl. Beneath the photos was a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. He recognized Helen's elegant script from birthday cards and holiday notes. The words were careful, measured, but their meaning was unmistakable. She wrote that Jessica had never deserved him, that her daughter was too much like her father, selfish and incapable of real connection. But Helen was different. She had seen Marcus from the very beginning, understood what he needed, what he lacked. She could offer him more than Jessica ever had, more than anyone else ever would. All he had to do was accept. Marcus read the letter 3 times, each pass making him feel more ill. The words were vague enough to be denied, carefully constructed to avoid anything overtly explicit. Helen had written a confession that was not quite a confession, an offer that could be dismissed as misunderstanding if anyone else saw it. She had given him evidence that proved nothing and everything at the same time. He dropped the letter onto the table and pressed his hands against his face. The walls of his apartment felt like they were closing in. He thought about Lily sleeping in the next room, innocent and unaware of the storm gathering around her. He thought about Jessica, who would never believe that her own mother was capable of this. He thought about himself, standing at the edge of a cliff with no clear path forward. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt completely and utterly alone. Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat in the living room with the lights off, the letter and photographs spread across the coffee table in front of him. Every time he closed his eyes, the words came back to him. Helen's elegant handwriting spelling out things that should never have been written. He replayed every interaction from the past several weeks, seeing them now with terrible clarity. The touches that seemed accidental, the comments that could be interpreted multiple ways, the questions funneled through an innocent child. It had all been deliberate, a slow and careful campaign that he had been too afraid to acknowledge. Around 3 in the morning, he walked to Lily's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She lay curled on her side, one arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit, her breathing soft and even. She knew nothing about the storm her father was navigating. To her, Grandma Helen was a source of cookies and hugs and unconditional adoration. Marcus could not imagine telling her the truth, could not picture the confusion and hurt that would cross her face. But he also could not allow the situation to continue, could not let Helen use his daughter as a pawn in whatever game she was playing. He returned to the living room and sat in the darkness until dawn began to lighten the edges of the curtains. His thoughts slowly crystallized into something resembling a plan. Avoiding Helen had not worked. Ignoring the problem had only allowed it to grow. The only path forward was confrontation, not with anger or accusations, but with clarity. He needed to draw a line that could not be misunderstood, a boundary that left no room for interpretation. The decision settled into his chest like a stone. It was not the outcome he wanted, but it was the only one he could live with. Whatever happened next, he would face it directly. For Lily's sake, and for his own. Marcus arranged to meet Helen at a park near her house on Saturday afternoon. He told her he wanted to discuss something important, and she agreed without asking questions. Her voice on the phone had been pleasant, almost eager, as if she had been waiting for this call. He did not bring Lily. He asked a neighbor to watch her for an hour, explaining that he had an errand to run. The park was quiet when he arrived, just a few joggers on the distant path and an elderly couple sitting on a bench near the pond. Helen was already there, seated on a bench beneath a large oak tree, her posture straight and composed. She wore a light blue cardigan and had her hands folded in her lap. When she saw Marcus approaching, she smiled, the same smile she had given him so many times before, warm on the surface with something unreadable underneath. Marcus sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving a clear space between them. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say during the drive over, running through the words until they felt solid in his mouth. But now that he was here, facing her, the rehearsed speech seemed inadequate. He decided to speak plainly, without preamble or softening. He told her that he had received the letter. He told her that he understood what she was offering, what she had been suggesting through her words and actions over the past several weeks. He watched her face as he spoke, looking for any sign of shame or denial, but her expression remained neutral, almost curious. Then he said the words he had come to deliver. He told her that he was not going to show the letter to Jessica or anyone else. He was not going to make accusations or create a scandal. But from this point forward, every interaction between them would be strictly about Lily and nothing more. Anytime Helen wanted to see her granddaughter, Marcus would arrange it in a public place with other people present. There would be no more private conversations, no more ambiguous moments, no more letters or photographs or whispered comments. The boundary was absolute. Helen's smile faded as he spoke. For a moment, something flickered behind her eyes, a flash of surprise or perhaps irritation. Then she leaned back slightly and tilted her head, regarding him the way she might regard a student who had given an unexpected answer. She told him he was overreacting. Her voice was calm, almost pitying. She said the letter had been nothing more than the honest thoughts of a lonely woman who had watched her daughter throw away a good man. There was nothing inappropriate about expressing sympathy, about offering friendship. If he had interpreted it as something else, that was his misunderstanding, not her intention. Marcus had expected this response. He had known she would deny, deflect, reframe the narrative to make him seem unreasonable, but her words did not shake him the way they might have a week ago. He had spent too many nights wrestling with doubt, and he had come out the other side with something harder and clearer than before. He told her it did not matter whether he had misunderstood. He told her that his interpretation was irrelevant. What mattered was the boundary he was setting, and he expected her to respect it. If she could not accept these terms, then he would have to reconsider whether continued contact with Lily was in his daughter's best interest. The words hung in the air between them. Helen's composure cracked, just for an instant. Her jaw tightened, and her eyes narrowed with something that looked like anger. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its warmth. She asked him who he thought he was. She reminded him that she was Lily's grandmother, that she had known Jessica since birth, that she had a right to be part of her granddaughter's life. She said he was being paranoid, ungrateful, that she had only ever tried to help him. Marcus stood up. His legs felt steadier than he had expected. He looked down at Helen, at this woman who had made him feel small and confused and ashamed, and he realized that her power over him had been built entirely on his own silence. He told her she could think whatever she wanted about him. He told her he was not interested in being right or winning an argument. He was interested in protecting his daughter from the complications of adults, from situations she was too young to understand. That was his only priority, and he would not compromise on it. He nodded once, a gesture that was both farewell and dismissal, then turned and walked away. He did not look back. Behind him, he heard nothing, no response, no footsteps following. Just the sound of birds in the trees and the distant laughter of children somewhere across the park. The weeks that followed were quiet. Helen did not call. She did not send messages or show up at unexpected moments. The silence was both a relief and a source of low-level anxiety. Marcus kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Jessica to call with accusations, for some consequence he had not anticipated. But nothing came. Lily asked about her grandmother a few times in those early days. Marcus told her that Grandma Helen was busy with some things, but that they would see her again soon. He kept his voice light, his explanations simple. Lily accepted them the way children accept most things adults tell them, with brief disappointment followed by distraction. About 3 weeks after the conversation in the park, Jessica called. Her tone was different this time, more guarded. She said her mother had mentioned that Marcus had said some things, that there had been some kind of disagreement. She asked what was going on. Marcus chose his words carefully. He told Jessica that he had established some ground rules for how he and Helen would interact going forward. Nothing dramatic, just clearer boundaries that would make things easier for everyone, especially Lily. He did not mention the letter or the photographs or the moments in the dark. Those details would only complicate a situation that was already complicated enough. Jessica was silent for a long moment. Then she said she did not know what had happened between them, and she was not sure she wanted to know. But if Marcus thought boundaries were necessary, she would respect his judgment. She asked only that he not keep Lily away from her grandmother completely. Marcus agreed. He had never wanted to cut Helen out of Lily's life entirely. He had only wanted to protect the space around his daughter, to ensure that whatever was happening between the adults did not spill over onto her. A month later, Helen reached out. She sent a text message, polite and brief, asking if she could take Lily to the zoo the following Saturday. Marcus agreed, on the condition that he would drop Lily off and pick her up, and that they would meet at the zoo entrance rather than at Helen's house. The outing went smoothly. Helen was cordial when they met, her smile smaller than before, but not unfriendly. She did not try to engage Marcus in conversation beyond the necessary logistics. When he returned to pick up Lily, his daughter was full of stories about penguins and giraffes, and Helen handed her over without incident. Marcus did not know if Helen had truly changed, or if she was simply biding her time, waiting for another opportunity. He could not read her the way she seemed to read everyone else, but he was no longer afraid of her. He had found something inside himself during those sleepless nights and difficult conversations, a core of resolve that he had not known existed. Whatever came next, he would handle it. Another Saturday morning arrived, indistinguishable from dozens before it. Marcus stood in the bathroom, working on Lily's hair. His fingers moved with more confidence now, weaving the strands into a braid that actually looked intentional. Lily watched in the mirror, her eyes bright with approval. She asked him a question that caught him off guard. She wanted to know why he never had a girlfriend. All her friends' dads had girlfriends or new wives, she said. Why was he always alone? Marcus met her eyes in the mirror and smiled. He told her he was not alone. He was too busy being her best friend to worry about anything else. Maybe someday that would change, he added. But for now, the two of them were doing just fine. Lily considered this for a moment, then grinned. She declared that she was the best friend anyone could have, and Marcus agreed without hesitation. He secured the braid with a small elastic band, then spun her around to face him. They walked out of the apartment together, Lily's hand in his, stepping into the morning sunlight. The air was crisp and clean, full of possibility. Marcus did not know what the future held. He did not know if the challenges were behind him or still waiting around some unseen corner. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would protect this child. He would guard the boundaries of their small, imperfect life, and he would never again let fear or shame keep him silent when silence was not safe. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough.